Hi guys, welcome back to The Social Tune and a brand new episode of Record Roundup. So as we get further and further into the year, more and more albums are coming out, meaning I have to get a little bit pickier with my album choices. And this week, we had a lot of projects to choose from, but in the end, I managed to narrow it down to these 5. One I've praised in the past, one one-hit wonder, one sent to me on Twitter, one pleasant surprise, and one of my most anticipated albums of 2018. So let's start with that.
I was a heartbreak junkie. You were a diamond, I was the heap of fool's gold.
Every year, hundreds of acts release music under the radar, and most of it is interchangeable. But once in a while, you'll get that little-known yet frighteningly talented artist who drops a gem that doesn't get nearly enough credit. And in 2016, that artist was Kraft, who made a massive splash with his glam rock debut, Dolls of Highland. An album that went unnoticed by many, but for most who heard it, including myself, was one of the best albums of that year overall. And since then, Kraft has just kept releasing music, including an impressive amount of covers. But finally, towards the end of 2017, he started dropping singles for his new album, Full Circle Nightmare. And honestly, for me at least, it's even better. Seriously, I know how amazing that debut was, but this album really does give that one a run for its money. For taking a similar formula to that album, minus the minor complaints that I had for it, chiefest of which being its length. For as much as I loved Dolls of Highland, there were several moments of indulgence. And the album as a whole, while awesome, was really just out to have some fun. This is a straight shot of pure joy. 10 tracks with barely an inch of fat on them. The only track that felt just a little bit too busy instrumentally was Belmont One Trick Pony. And even then, I absolutely loved that song's chorus. And all across this album, the instrumentals are just as incredible as they were on his debut. With pianos, organs, harmonicas, drums, and God knows what else thrown in there, to create one phenomenal hook after another. From the off-the-wall horns and the chugging riff with that gigantic chorus on Exile Rag, to the gorgeous horn guitar and piano ballad Slick and Delta Queen, to the more stripped-back string and drum and bass mix on The Rager, to the wonderful rollicking tempo and the harmonicas on Bridge City Rose, to the more keening electric guitars and the gospel vocals on Fake Magic Angel, and every single chorus strikes home and sticks with you. But the reason that this album will probably stick with me longer than his last album comes down to the lyrics and songwriting. On that last album, the content was all over the place, matching the wild fun of the instrumentation and Kraft's performance. Here, the album is no less colorful, but the lyrics and performance are much more measured while never compromising their energy, as each song dives into stories revolving around women in our protagonist's life. Whether it be the girl who moved on from him but will always have a special place in his heart on Bridge City Rose, or the girl who broke his heart on Heartbreak Junkie even though he admits that he was probably asking for it, or the wild party girl who he enjoys watching as she scares away all the boys on The Rager, or the Full Circle Nightmare who kind of speaks for herself on the title track. Heck, the album opens up with Fever Dream Girl, where he lists a number of classifications that men would bestow on women. And on that topic, the final track has a friend of his bitching about a girl who Kraft used to date, as he realizes just how pathetic this guy sounds right now, and knowing that this is also a clear reflection of how he used to be. The album is astonishingly self-aware and mature, especially for a glam rock record. And that brings us to the best track on this album full of classic rock songs, Slick and Delta Queen. A song where he meets up with an old girlfriend who he never truly appreciated when he was together with her, but now seeing her with her new boyfriend who actually does care about her, a man who reminds Kraft suspiciously of the person he used to be, he feels a huge pang of feelings for her as his old memories are stirred up. But even though he knows that she'll always be special to him, he realizes what's the best thing to do and moves on. In other words, this is the best kind of rock album you could hope for, with incredible writing, phenomenal hooks, and absolutely fantastic, off-the-wall theatrical instrumentation. Not only did it meet my high expectations for it, it surpassed them. And thus, it's easily a strong 9 out of 10, an absolutely essential listen from one of the greatest acts working in music today. Well done, Kyle Kraft, if Dolls of Highland brought you into the spotlight, then this album sealed your place in it, and I could not be happier. So one of the albums that I wanted to talk about this week got delayed. Oh, and I don't mean it was pushed back, I mean that I've ordered the CD and it's late. So instead, let's take a look at the newest post-hardcore release from Marmozets, the UK rock band who rose to prominence in 2014 with their math rock touch debut. And I have to say, it was pretty good. Not quite the star-making debut I was promised, but still showing real talent and potential moving forward. But this follow-up takes that sound into a much more accessible direction, with strong hooks and pop stylings that are far more appealing, at least to me. And frankly, after hearing this, the tepid reception that it's received from critics is kind of baffling to me. In fact, as UK rock bands making catchier follow-ups go, this is almost up there with that last Wolf Alice album. Almost. Because if I were to point out one major strength that that band has over this one, it would be the songwriting. Not that Marmozets' writing is bad, but it is a little bit too simplistic in terms of its prose. I will say though that frontwoman Becca McIntyre gives one hell of a great performance, ranging from the screams on Major System Error, to a more melodic Avril Lavigne-esque delivery on Habits, to a much softer cooing on Me and You. And that makes her a big part of why this album does work for me. It's just a really easy record for me to like, and while it's not gonna change anyone's life, it's a fun time that most audiences are bound to enjoy. I know I certainly did, as it's getting a solid 7 out of 10. Nice job, Marmozets, you've piqued my interest with this one, and I'm definitely curious to see where you go from here.
So I can fix your hand. I'll be your handyman.
So if you were to cast your minds back to 2013, you may remember a little explosive song called Sail, a song coming off an album released 2 years previously by relative newcomers AWOLNATION. And really, that song could have only been a hit in 2013. But the resurgence of both EDM and alternative rock created the unique circumstances for a song that outlandish to chart. Although, while I say outlandish, I don't necessarily mean good, as this band's unique sound has never been all that appealing to me. It's just not melodic or atmospheric enough for my style of electronica, or lyrical/catchy enough to be my kind of rock music. And on this album, well, it's a little less messy, but it's also less distinctive. And the type of album that, to be honest, really does turn me off. Because this is the type of album that relies almost solely on repetition, both in the lyrics and the riffs. Which would at least be interesting if there were a cohesive theme, but there really isn't. And unfortunately, the songwriting as a whole is nothing special. Well, okay then, maybe this could be the album where just the hooks and the melodies are enough to make it interesting. Well, yeah, to a certain extent. Songs like Miracle Man and the title track are catchy and melodic enough to be enjoyable, and it's not like any of the lyrical content is bad, just incredibly generic. The problem is that not every single song on this album stands out that much, meaning you just go through long stretches of interchangeable white noise. And then you have the songs that just feel like a complete waste of time, like Tall Tall Tale, which just ended up being drawn out, pointless, and muddy. But at the end of the day, I can't really get angry with this album. It's not bad, just the epitome of which may be worse to some people, but for me, it's just a light 5 out of 10. I don't recommend this, but listening to it won't do you any harm, so check it out if you're curious.
I live my life on. I'm Atletico, and I'm back here on my own. I live my life on. Why did I let you go? No, I'm back here on my own.
So seeing as how I'm still a relatively small review channel, I'm always looking to my community for suggestions. So when one of you guys told me to check out the new album by synth-pop artist Ray Morris, I thought, why not? After all, I do love synth-pop, and the lead-off singles seem fine enough. And on my first couple of listens, that's exactly what this was to me, fine enough. A little lightweight and minimalist, but enjoyable enough. And then something happened. I can't quite explain it, but it suddenly clicked for me, and now I'm delighted to say that I absolutely love this album. A simple, uncomplicated slice of synth-pop golds that will go overlooked by many, but which honestly deserves so much better. And there are multiple factors at play as to why. Because while I did initially say this was minimalistic, a lot of these songs feature incredibly layered and dynamic production, with phenomenal melodies, vocals, and multi-tracking. Songs like Wait for the Rain and Lower the Tone are minimalist in their individual elements, but when brought together become something so much more. And then there's Rae Morris herself, who is a far more potent performer on this album than on her debut, with an emotional, cooing delivery that can still sound strong and self-assured when necessary. And it really is her vocals and the excellent mixing by her musical and now life partner Friars on this album that gives this record a lot of its genuine beauty and atmosphere. This album was reportedly produced and written by just the two of them, and that really does come across in the intimacy of a lot of these tracks. Speaking of which, you have the content, which mainly focuses around socializing in today's antisocial climate. Which is why a lot of these songs are from the point of view of our protagonist, who is an introvert. Thus we get songs like Atletico, about our protagonist going out to the club, eager to put herself out there, only for her shyness to get to her as she comes back home with a ton of pent-up energy. Or songs about taking chances like Do It or Dip My Toe. The former of which is definitely repetitious, but so fun and catchy that I really didn't mind. And then you have the emotional songs like Push Me to My Limit, where her lover is pushing her and making her feel uncomfortable, something that introverts are especially sensitive to. Or the title track, where she encourages this guy to have the confidence in himself to keep looking for love even if he struck out with her. Or the absolutely adorable Lower the Tone, where she asks her lover to lower the energy now that they're alone together, since there's no one else around to show off to, and to be honest, it's just how she feels most comfortable. And really, the gripes I do have are extremely minor. Like, I wasn't a huge fan behind the skittering hi-hats of Physical Form, or the driving and slightly pitchy beat behind Reborn, even though the crescendo on the latter really did make up for it, but both are minor nitpicks and still good songs. And while some will argue that this is nothing all that groundbreaking or ambitious, for what it is, it's simple but also incredibly catchy, well-written, and emotionally evocative. And thus, it's easily an 8 out of 10. It may take a few listens to grow on you, and I won't say this album will be for everyone, but for me, it's absolutely great and easily one of the best albums that I've heard in 2018 thus far. So take my advice and check it out.
I'll always be your only postmodern boyfriend, guaranteed. I don't fuck around, my life is firmly underground. I'll be your only postmodern boyfriend, I'm for free.
And finally, let's talk about the newest release by Eric Taxxon. And it's about time I review this guy's music again. Since I reviewed Paul last summer, Eric Taxxon has dropped multiple different projects, all of which I've either been too busy to review or were just composed of one single long track, which is definitely interesting, but doesn't leave me much to talk about. And considering Paul was such a beautiful alternative pop album with fantastic songs like My Genre and especially Real Boy, I was eager to hear his newest release, One Pop. And to be honest, I'm really glad I did. Because while I wouldn't say there's a song on here that quite matches or tops Real Boy or even My Genre, it's a sharper and more potent project overall, and in my opinion, one of Eric Taxxon's best works to date. And the reason why is that it takes the melodic foundations on that album and then refines them, with catchy hooks and more of a balance between the instrumental and the lyrical tracks. Eric Taxxon said in the description of this album, "Welcome to the future." And with the hi-hats and the droning background beat on Trap, or the echoing full skittering beat on Rave, only to transition into beautiful horns towards the end, I believe it. On the other hand, the way Sign or Cine opens up with the sound of a mobile telephone ringing, with a wonderful crescendo of different elements being thrown in between, suggests that the sounds of the past are being incorporated here as well. I think the best way to describe this strange blend of past and future would be postmodern, which works considering one of the best tracks on this album is called Postmodern Boyfriend. And combined with the fantastic hooks on songs like Golden and the beautiful electronic pieces all across this album, it really was an enjoyable listen to me. If I had to come up with one complaint though, is that it felt a little short. I think that this has something to do with the fact that this is really only 8 tracks with an intro and an outro, and the fact that some of the tracks in the middle are a little bit too repetitive, meaning that they feel a little short. And so overall, even though everything we do get on this album is definitely solid, I do feel that we could get a little bit more of it. It feels just a tad bare bones. But I would still say that this is about on par with Paul as a whole, as it does refine that album's sound and doesn't really share any of its weaknesses. So I'm giving this a light 7 out of 10. Seriously, in terms of electronic music, Eric Taxxon is one of the most experimental and hard-working people on the platform. And as long as he keeps putting out music, I'm gonna keep checking it out, because I'm absolutely certain that one of these days he will strike gold for me. So those were the albums for the week. Let me know what you thought of them, and leave a like if you enjoyed. Just so you know, there won't be an album review this week, but the next record roundup shouldn't be too far away. Otherwise, if there are any other albums coming out that you'd like me to review, then please post them in the comments or tweet them at me at The Social Tune, link in the description. But in the meantime, please subscribe so you don't miss a thing, and until the next time, I'm Finn, and this is The Social Tune, signing off.
I'll ride with you till we both fall down, no, till we both fall down.